I'm Christopher G. Moore, and I'm speaking from the Noel Coward Suite at the Oriental Hotel in Bangkok, Thailand. One of the things I'm often asked as a writer of crime fiction is, where did you come up with the idea for your central character, Vincent Calvino? Vincent Calvino's backstory takes me to New York City in 1984, where I was spending time with an old friend named John Stevens. John had invited me to New York. He was teaching for a 6-month period at John Jay College of Criminology and had quite extensive contacts with the New York Police Department. I was able, through John, to sign on for their civilian ride-along program, which allowed me to ride with NYPD in places like Harlem and Brooklyn. And this was in the early 80s, and things were still pretty tough from a crime point of view. It was during that time I really had a chance firsthand to see law enforcement on the streets of a major city like New York. And it left an indelible imprint. And the character of Vincent Calvino was shaped by those early experiences in New York. So drawing upon what I had learned with the police, the kind of police that I were with, ultimately this character who's half Jewish, half Italian emerged in the form of Vincent Calvino. So the next step in the creation of the character of Vincent Calvino happened in 1990 when a very good friend of mine, Ronald Lieberman, a lawyer from Toronto, Ontario, was in Thailand. And we spent some time together, and it was really Ron who said, have you ever thought of setting a detective or private eye story in Southeast Asia? And I thought that was an interesting idea. It really hadn't been done in Southeast Asia. So I thought, I will tinker with that. And I'd already had the basic idea of the Vincent Calvino character from the time I spent in New York City. So I sat down to write the first of these books in 1991, and that book was Spirit House. So 10 novels later, Vincent Calvino now is in his mid to late 40s, is still solving crimes in Southeast Asia, and still runs the one-man private investigation shop on Sukhumvit Road in mid-Sukhumvit. And he takes the usual kind of cases that private eyes in Bangkok take. Those men with broken hearts, whiskey on their breath, fire in their gut, revenge in their eyes, come into his office, lay the money on the table and say, bring her back, or find what she's done, or find out about her family. And Vincent is the kind of guy who takes those cases. He takes other kinds of cases as well. Both kind of cases require all of his cultural resources. What he learned as a lawyer in New York City, what he's learned as an investigator working in the streets of Bangkok. So in Vincent's world, it's very important for him to draw upon these cultural resources. He needs to know both communities because he's working in both communities. He has a foot in both communities. He needs to understand how Westerns think, their motivations, their desires, their expectations, and to try to make those realistic in a culture which looks at things from a different point of view, has a different history, a different language, a different way of resolving conflict. This is a culture where conflict is avoided. If it can all be avoided, that is the best outcome. So you avoid confrontation, you avoid conflict, you always smile. Even when the knife comes out and the blade flashes, the smile is still there. Vincent understands the world, he understands the limitations of those worlds, and part of what the Vincent Calvino series does is to bring the reader into the two worlds that coexist in Bangkok and in Thailand and in Southeast Asia. Vincent is what you would call at this stage, having been solving crime since 1992 in Spirit House, an old Asia hand. This means that he's able to provide a kind of guide to the local viewpoint, whether it's taboos, superstition, going to the astrologer, understanding the motivation of why you would make an offering on a birthday, what is the magic that's involved in numbers when you play lottery. All of these kinds of factors need to be factored in when you look at a particular case, because those are often the places where clues are left. Clues are left in the way that we try, through our belief system, to make ourselves feel secure. Vincent understands this. He understands a lot about the Thai people, not everything. He's still an outsider. And as an outsider, he will never be within the Thai culture accepted as a Thai, but he will know enough to gain the respect of Thai people. And that is enough to allow him to be effective as a private investigator. So I think it's an exciting series with a character who's able to go through cultural obstacles around them, over them, through them, and still come out with some kind of basic understanding of what the human condition is, the limits of our humanity, the limits of what we can expect in life, and how culture shapes our identity. We find Vincent, after 10 books, that some of his identity is coming from the Thai cultural aspect as well. So we see a really post-national, post-modern kind of private eye when we read the Calvino books. We see someone who started in one culture with all those barriers, all those paradigms and structures that an American would have, coming into a new culture and finding himself needing to refine, to pare down, to reevaluate what he accepted as reality. In New York, that reality cannot be transposed totally to a place like Bangkok, Thailand. Vincent understands that. Vincent has gained the tools, psychological and mythological, over time through this series to bring the other characters and his clients hopefully to what is a good resolution at the end of the day. I'd like to talk a little bit about what I find to be an interesting structure for most of the Calvino novels. What I try to do is to take a number of events, usually involving expats at one stage or another, as well as with locals, set those events into motion, to see the momentum of those events, and ultimately the paths of people do cross. And the question is, when the paths cross, what happens? Because destinies do change. Once we walk this way as opposed to that way, something will happen that would not otherwise have happened. If I look at the structure of certain movies, like the movie Crash, the movie Babel, or the movie Burn After Reading, what we see are unrelated events that do come together in extraordinary ways. And they portray a kind of self-delusion that most people have, that what they're doing, their path, their way of seeing, is disconnected from other people, or they don't look at the full consequences of the events that are happening to them. So in the Calvino books, if I think of like Paying Back Jack, the last one of these books, where Calvino is in Pattaya, someone dies, that's one event. He has a minor car accident in Bangkok, which leads to another trail of events, and ultimately we see a convergence of people and events which are one. And in that unity, we start to see the original events in an entirely different light. And it seems to me that that enriches the reading experience. It certainly enriches my experience when I read a book like that or when I see a film like that.